Earlier this week, Dr. Ravitch and I were discussing the challenges facing women and those who support them when it comes to managing individuals, organizations using AI. And that, frankly, and I see your head nodding already, the challenges seem to be everywhere, from how AI is built to who is building it and to how it's being governed. I've been inspired by your work so far in reading about it and about specifically about how people-centered it is. Your work in people-centered organizational change, your people-centered efforts in researching individual leadership development. It just seems like every day we're asking AI to do more and more, but it's such a reflection or inflection point to reflect on what makes us uniquely human and what it
That's
means
right.
to be human. While AI, frankly, and I'll just continue on just a little bit more, that while AI doesn't have the same biological limitations as humans, like we all need to sleep, it also doesn't have the characteristics that make us valuable individual, team, and organizational leaders, like
That's right.
judgment, like compassion, like curiosity. So, Dr. Ravitz, to begin, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about you, your work, and how your work has evolved to address AI?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Kristin, and for your introduction and for all of the planning we've done to get here. I'm Sharon Ravitch. I'm a professor of practice at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, where my work focuses on leadership, organizational development, learning, design of learning environments, workplace research, and adaptive change. My interdisciplinary background in human development, psychology, anthropology, business, and education shapes how I understand leadership as something deeply connected to identity, trust, culture, relationships, and the systems we work within. Throughout my career, I've worked alongside leaders, teams, and organizations across sectors and continents, cultural contexts, focusing on the human dynamics that shape change, trust, identity, power, agency, culture, and the beliefs that drive how leaders make decisions. More recently, my work centers on AI adoption as a human and adaptive leadership challenge. What happens to people and organizations when AI enters the workspace? And how can executives use their voices, judgment, and influence to help shape this moment rather than simply adapt to it or be arbiters of decisions made by others? So I'm delighted to be here with you today to talk about such an important issue that adaptive leaders everywhere need to really understand from this moment on.
Mm. And already we have a question coming in, and you mentioned leadership challenges. One leadership challenge to AI is, frankly, resistance. So the question is, how do you lead effectively when there is resistance to change within the organization and the leadership team is composed exclusively of men?
That is a great question. I mean, one of the ways I'll answer this is to answer this about the pressures that leaders are feeling broadly, right? So broadly, leaders are feeling particular pressures. They're wondering about, should I be learning another tool or a platform? And so really this question is a good one. How do women leaders need to understand, what do we need to understand about this moment? And how do we shape what comes next? And so, and I'll come back to the specifics of that question at the end. But I think that framing that we need well before we even talk about resistance is that AI is not a technology problem or challenge. It's an adaptive leadership challenge. So we engage resistance in adaptive leadership challenges. So, one way I think about this is it looks like this moment is asking leaders about tools, but it's really asking leaders about value, expertise, credibility, control, and purpose. Those are deeply human questions, and actually resistance is a horizontal in all of what is happening across the workscape relative to AI adoption and integration. So part of my advice is treat your hesitation or others' hesitation as adaptive intelligence, as an adaptive signal, not inadequacy. And I'll bear this through specifically to the question that was asked. We now have evidence that people who visibly use AI are potentially and quite probably judged as less competent and less diligent by colleagues. And I'll talk about how this is gendered. When you layer into that the double bind that leaders already face and the reputational risk of experimenting, it's not evenly shared, right? And this is where gender and other forms of identity politics come in. So if you feel cautious, that's a caution about your culture. And what I think is we need to read it and lead from it. And so even something like resistance, we need to read it and lead in relation to it rather than try to manage it away. So for one thing, it's vital to claim the capacities that are appreciating in value. As routine analytical work is getting automated, ethical judgment, relational intelligence, contextual discernment, and trust building stop being so-called soft skills. They're the hardest skills. They become known as the hardest, most strategic skills in the organization. And so that, and then that's not a consolation prize, right? That's a center of gravity for how you guide AI's role, including in relation to resistance, instead of absorbing it. My strong recommendation is to build trust as infrastructure. Give people permission to experiment out loud without paying a competence tax. Don't make fear taboo, because surfaced fear is the clearest institutional intelligence that we have. It's an adaptive signal about what people value and believe is at risk. Resistance is an articulation of that. And so in a reframe, we try to understand resistance differently. So I'll just finish this answer up and go on to the resistance piece. No one needs to know how to code to shape this moment or to convince anyone else that they know how to drive this. AI can embed existing patterns of credibility, promotion, and access into organizational systems. So you can challenge AI-supported hiring decisions, question automated performance reviews, or insist on human oversight. The goal isn't to keep up with every platform. It's to help shape the rules before the rules become too difficult to change. One of the rules has to become transparency around resistance. Any kind of resistance, including gendered resistance, right? Because when we reframe resistance, when we create an understanding of it as an adaptive signal of what priorities or what values are being crossed, perceived included, that's where it becomes an adaptive signal that we can use rather than coming at someone with that. My work really looks at understanding resistance. In fact, my work very much deals with resistance to AI in the workplace because I see it as something that needs to get explored and examined in a very particular set of ways, not managed away, not quieted down, even if and when it's gendered.
That need to experiment, we often talk about in Women's Leadership Program. We even have sessions on that about innovation through experimentation. There's a certain amount of vulnerability and willingness to play that we lose as we get older and as we move through the workplace and into more senior roles that we need to go back to. And I love that someone called out specifically giving people the permission to be curious without
That's right.
being penalized through
That's
either
right.
socially, culturally, or otherwise.
That's right. Absolutely.
So,
And that's a culture you can proactively create. But the question about resistance is there's real constraints and real challenges built into every ecosystem. So how do you see some of these things as adaptive signals that can, really need to be gauged and leveraged rather than pushed against?
mhm. So how does one lead up in that regard? Like you're like leading against resistance, leading openness through creating a culture of community, creating a culture of experimentation, especially when your leadership is not open to that. So I go back to that question, like how do you lead from underneath in this case?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think, and underneath can look like a lot of things, right? And so I want to say, I think that one of a lot of times women are expected to help their organizations adapt to AI, even when they don't control the technology strategy or hold the highest formal authority. So I really appreciate your question. How can women executives use their influence to shape the rules, the boundaries, and the culture surrounding AI? I think that's really where the crux of it is. So what my thoughts about this are, if you've been handed AI adoption and you don't have that authority wherever you are in the ecosystem, that is not a reason to wait. It's a reason to lead from proximity because you're closer to the truth of it than those who might be higher up in the hierarchy or have a title that might sound more apt to do so. What do I mean by that? Proximity That's the work, like that proximity to the work is actually a form of power. In fact, this is a major tenet of adaptive leadership and systems, is that the people closest to the phenomenon actually have actionable knowledge we need to tap into regardless of hierarchy. So the people setting the AI strategy from the top are working perhaps with abstractions. You're likely working with what actually happens when the tools meet humans, where it breaks, where people quietly route around it, where the real risk lives. And that knowledge of the people closest to the phenomenon, that is scarce and that is decision grade. And so in relation to this, I'll just share what I see as sort of three concrete levers to convert this knowledge into influence. First, shape the agreements. Even if you didn't set the strategy, you may not choose the platform, but you can convene the conversation not yet happening in most workplaces. What are we actually agreeing to? What's permitted? What's off limits? What needs a human in the loop? Who's accountable when things go wrong or when the outputs are wrong? The person who drafts the working norms often shapes the outcome more than the person who signed the purchase order. So right now, AI governance is a vacuum in most organizations. And vacuums get filled by who shows up with the clearest questions. You don't need permission to be that person. You can create and socialize good questions and have the confidence to convene people around them. So I would say second, and this is really vital, control the narrative through evidence. Influence without authority runs on credibility, and credibility runs on data. Gather it. Surface where AI is quietly helping, where it's quietly failing, where people are afraid to say something isn't working or isn't working for them. Bring it back, not as a complaint, but as adaptive intelligence. Here's what's actually happening on the ground, and here's what it tells us. Then you're informing the strategy, and that's how you get pulled into the rooms that you were not in. And third, I think the most powerful and overlooked perhaps, you shape culture through what you make safe, right? You shape organizational culture through what you make safe. You shape teams through what you make safe. You may not control the policy, but you can control the conditions in your spheres of influence. Whether people around you can admit they're struggling, question an output, or disclose that they've used AI without fear. And so those are conditions that I think we can all step up into, truly regardless of role. And then, of course, in relation to role.
We do have an interesting question about roles specifically in certain industry, like to follow up on what you just shared about influence and about leading through it, leading through resistance, leading through proximity. The question in the chat is about how can your advice be applied to those who are in the education space, in the medical space, where often we see women in leadership roles, but not the ultimate leadership role.
So yeah.
So I suppose the question coming from the attendee, and please, Jean-Pierre, do correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but is it enough that women who are in senior roles in these spaces are they in a position where they can influence that level of organizational change when the most senior leaders in their organizations are still people who are resistant to this change, and more commonly, and forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but more commonly than not, are men?
No, absolutely. And you're not speaking out of turn. I don't, from my perspective. Thank you for the question, Jean-Pierre. So here's what I'll say. This AI moment carries particular stakes and opportunities for women leaders. How AI affects our credibility, our authority, our visibility, and how we are or are not on a continuum recognized as an expert is really shaped by this AI moment. And so let me just talk about that for a moment. There's a sharper edge that this moment carries for women leaders. And it is vital, I think, to name both the risks of that so that we can work with them and the opportunity. And so I'll obviously start with the risks. So the risks. AI is redistributing credibility. Who gets seen as an expert, whose judgment gets trusted, and whose work gets recognized. Women already navigate a credibility system that is not neutral. A woman leader already who's using AI can have her competence questioned twice, once for being a woman in authority and again for using AI. Until we say that out loud, we'll keep misreading her caution as a lack of AI readiness. So let me say this. Watch very carefully, listen very carefully in your organizations and teams for how the language moves. This is where authority quietly leaks. When a woman builds an AI capability and it's logged as she's helping the team with the tools, while a man doing the identical work is leading AI strategy, the frame has already shrunk her authority. Whoever gets narrated as the strategist gets recognized as the expert. So the fight for credibility is in part a fight for that language, and that language is very gendered. Finally, in this realm, AI is automating work, and specifically the work that our credibility systems have over rewarded, elevating now the relational, ethical, and discerning work that women have long done, often without credit. That's not a threat to women's leadership. It's a long overdue repricing. So this is a moment of real stakes and real leverage for women leaders. The stakes, an uneven credibility tax that we must name out loud, or it operates in the dark, slowly eroding or preventing in the first place our leadership from being what it is and should appear like to others. The opportunity, the flip side, is this chance, this moment to claim the capacities that are finally appreciated and to insist that women's AI work gets renamed as strategy, not help. And one of the things I want to say in that, we have to be careful, though, not to fall into tropes about women, right? We always need to be very careful as we do this, not to fall into the care trap when we talk about women leaders. I'll stop there and see, if you want to follow up.
Yeah. So what would you advise to someone who is trying to take these challenges on, but the conversation around AI just seems to be moving so quickly?
So how would I?
Like I imagine based on what you just shared that
Yeah,
we're going back to we're
yeah, I
going
hear what you're saying.
like we're going back we're
Yeah,
going away from we're going I don't want to say going away from going to sticking with keeping the focus on your role as a woman in an organization from that position of authority, from
yeah,
cultivating trust among your colleagues, among going up lateral and down, among creating that credibility, as opposed to getting distracted by perhaps the latest headline from this new AI tool that was launched, or this most
yeah,
recent
yeah,
model, or something else, some other update about the tech itself, because so frequently the conversations that come up around AI are those news headlines, as opposed to these underlying leadership
yeah,
challenges that you just have been describing and advising us on.
yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that question. So what I want to say is, I want to say so many things, but so, a leader's approach to AI adoption has to really take into account that it's a human and adaptive leadership challenge. It's not a technical rollout. And so I think actually what a lot of organizations and leaders miss when they focus on efficiency and implementation before trust, identity, culture, and learning is that the efficiency relies on trust, identity, culture, and learning to be sustainable. And so, treating AI adoption like a software rollout, buying licenses, training the people, measuring the usage, that's a 2023 playbook for a 2026 problem. Because we're no longer just adding a tool or a set of tools to the workflow. With agentic systems, we're adding something that acts, drafts, decides, recommends. And the moment a technology acts, it renegotiates who counts as an expert, what good work looks like, and who's accountable when a decision goes wrong. These are not IT questions. These are identity, status, and trust questions. No training module is going to resolve them. So here's a signal that many leaders and systems miss. When people hesitate or quietly route their work through AI off to the side, the reflex is to read it as a skills gap. And it almost never is. And we have data on this now. It's a signal of low trust, reputational risk, and rules that no one has made visible. So what I'm calling now in my work, shadow AI adoption, it's not a compliance failure that we should be policing. It's the most honest data you can get about whether the culture feels safe. Meet a trust signal with more training and you will not close the gap. You will drive it underground and you will lose your ability. And this is vital to read risk early. We need to always be trying to read risk early. Moving fast and breaking things with AI prevents that. What durable AI adoption really requires, from my perspective, is conscious agreements made before you scale, not reverse engineered after something breaks. You have to name the permitted uses. You have to protect the data. You have to be explicit about disclosure and about where the human stays meaningfully in the loop. And I argue the human is the loop, and about who owns the outcome when a system gets it wrong. And this is something we'll talk about a bit later. So what those of us in the field are talking about right now is that the fastest growing gap is the accountability gap. AI is scaling faster than our agreements about responsibility for what it produces. And closing that gap is core leadership work. It's not procurement work. So your competitive edge isn't how fast you deploy. It's how deeply you can learn together without fear. And yes, that needs to be efficient. The organizations that win the next phase of AI are not the ones who are first to the finish line. They're the ones who are building the conditions for AI to be used well. And that requires vision, and it requires a certain kind of patience while moving quickly. And it certainly requires wisdom, because you can't automate your way there. You have to lead your way there, and you have to lead your way there with your people through discovery focused dialogue.
I want to go back to the AI adoption that you were discussing earlier. What do you see as examples of people routing their work off to the side from a leadership perspective?
It's a great question. I mean, I work with a lot of leaders who are rolling out AI adoption right now. And so some of this is pre-AI adoption, where people were using AI, but it wasn't yet, individuals were using AI, but it wasn't yet, in organizations in any systematic way. So what you're finding is people who have been using it themselves to do things, suddenly it's front and center in their workplaces. And so now there's more of a scanning for who's using what than there was even 6 months ago. And so the routing it offline is an interesting thing, and because there are a lot of angles on this. I mean, one piece of this is people will route it simply by either trying to cover up their usage of it. So they're using it to do various projects, various deliverables, to create various outputs, but they're trying to mask using it, right? That's not healthy in an organization. There need to be guardrails. There need to be very clear, transparent use rules or use cases that people can understand. When there's murkiness, when there's lack of clarity, and when people are worried about the perception of them and how that lands into their opportunities or even their sustainability in a place, people start hiding and covering up and trying to, human up the AI deliverable instead of having the conversations about when do we use it, how do we use it, and how do we share with each other when we're using it, and how do we not have a credibility tax. So that, what we say is when the hierarchy is missing something and creates edicts, there's always an underground. And I think with AI, the rerouting and trying to pretend one is not using, or teams are not using AI, it is actually about trust in the system. The adaptive leader would say to that, this is a moment where we need to make governance decisions about how AI will be used so that we protect people from this tax of credibility. So I think a lot of this is about conceptualizing the moment and then actionizing what you understand from the moment as a leader to say, how do we protect our people in a moment where there's a whole range and variation of AI use? We have not been clear, usually in most systems, about what it can be used for. We need to have transparent conversations so that within teams, across units, divisions, functions, And across the board, people know exactly where we stand on AI. Managers and supervisors are clear, and then people understand the rules and the guardrails, and they can proceed not having to go underground. And to
Mhm.
me, going underground with AI in this moment is very dangerous, because the more that people try to hide or camouflage their AI use, less verification there probably is on those outputs. And again, some of those outputs are foundational in directions that we take in our organizations.
It's interesting that you're seeing that some AI use in organizations is associated with shame or embarrassment, or the perception of being inadequate in some way performing on your job. Do you find that to be more prevalently associated with women or as opposed to men?
Yes, I think the credibility tax is double on women. You already, we know, there's a lot of research on this, that women already face a credibility tax or a credibility burden as a leader. Full stop, period. Now, add in this secondary sort of confirmation bias on women's leadership, and you have a double bind. And
Mhm.
it really is an AI double bind on women. And the reason it's an AI double bind on women is because already there's a credibility burden and a credibility tax on women leaders. So while any leader will potentially face credibility issues around AI, when there's already the foundation of a question of credibility, and we know that there is for high level women leaders, you are now going to be doubly questioned, because the first question exacerbates or creates the conditions for the second question of your authority to swoop right in, often unconsciously. Um, Most people aren't consciously devaluing women leaders. It's in the ecosystem, and I think the same is true for the dubiousness or the suspicion that's happening now around AI and this notion of AI and competence and expertise. And so if women's expertise is broadly questioned, which it is, well, now we have a whole nother source of questioning, but
Mhm.
it's a double standard. That's why it's a double bind, because our male colleagues, because that foundational questioning of their credibility is often not there. And that's not for everyone. Look, this varies by social identities. But I do think if we're just going to broadly talk about women, that there is a way in which we have to have our eyes wide open, right? So if a man is like, well, wait, let me ask some questions about this. I want to understand this, or this before a rollout. It's often interpreted as strategy and discernment. And if a woman asks those very same questions, it's often seen as hesitation or lack of skill.
Mhm.
And so, this is the moment we're in. Naming that is where the growth lies in an organization. Really saying that these phenomena are at play and really working to push against them is the only way forward, I think, in this moment.
So we have seen the arguments about productivity for that, like AI increases productivity. And we even have someone on the chat sharing that they've themselves has found the use of AI to be extremely helpful in increasing their productivity. And that is one argument to be made about adopt the benefit of adopting AI.
Absolutely.
So the question posed is how can organizations create an AI strategy that values not only productivity, but also empowerment?
Yeah, I really love that. I appreciate that question. And honestly, I think they can go hand in hand. I love AI for how productive it helps me be. I think many of us do. I think most of us do at this point in the workplace. And how do we become productive and efficient while we really balance the humanization? I think is a really big piece of that question. And so let me answer it in this way. I think many of us have an instinct to ask, what can humans still do that AI can't? But this is a shrinking game. And so the list is getting shorter every quarter. The better question is, what is AI making scarce? And what's becoming scarce is discernment, knowing what's worth trusting when everything sounds equally polished, right? That's different than productivity, but the productivity is leading to outputs that we have to really think about carefully. So there's a vital distinction in this, that AI can produce, the performance of high quality productivity, and that it can perform empathy, and that it can perform other kinds of sort of what we think of as agentic roles in the workplace, and it generates analysis for us. Here's the thing, it's generating words, and what we need to understand is there's responsibility for that, in our judgment in that. Not just the productivity quality question, right? But really thinking about AI and how it cannot be responsible for judgment, how it cannot hold a relationship through conflict, how it is not accountable to falsehoods, how it cannot read a specific room in a charged moment, or decide what matters when values collide on a team. So AI is not accountable. And so even though it's productive, we have to, in the workplace, it's very different than in our individual productivity, because it has ecosystemic and relational and interpersonal implications. AI is not accountable, and that accountability gap between performing care and efficacy, and being responsible, is exactly where human leadership is relocating in this moment, and I think for the future. And so, what rises to the top in this isn't communication or empathy or even productivity in the abstract. It's judgment over ambiguity, over ethical discernment when there's no clean answer or output. It's trust built through accountability over time, and the contextual intelligence to know which move a moment is calling for. Is something calling for productivity? Is it calling for, strategic pauses? How is that being discerned? And so, even to another piece of this question, I think the moment we say relational intelligence, and this comes back to our last question as well, the moment we say that relational intelligence and ethical judgment are rising in value, there's a pull to frame them as women's leadership, warm, caring, the emotional labor of the organization. And this framing is a cage. It resorts women right back into the supportive role while men keep the strategic one. So women claim these strengths without being confined by them, by refusing the soft framing entirely and insisting on the strategic one. And in that is the productivity quality debate. And women have to really be able to discern what is quality, what is productivity, what is expertise, what is knowledge, what are the beginnings and the ends of these things, and how are we going to discern, not just as individual leaders, but on our teams. How can I be the lead discerner or the code discerner, but the one who is telling people our discernment is precisely what needs to interrupt the pace of productivity in some cases. So we love productivity, but we have to reconceptualize some of its pacing. That's the human in the loop part. And so I'm a huge fan of AI, and I'm a huge fan of its productivity, and I'm an enormous proponent of full AI integration, not just adoption in the workplace. To me, those things will really happen best when the goal is not to move fast and break things, but to move not slow, but to move discerningly and not alone, right? To have a trusted thought partnership as the model, to be a community of inquiry around what are the implications, because everyone has a different perspective and translated into a different wisdom on the implications of different models, different logics around productivity. And I think women can really be at the helm of a lot of these decisions, really thinking about the gestalt of the workplace and how it fits into society more broadly. This is a rapidly changing workscape now. And I think those of us who are the most adaptive can really harness the moment. And I think when you're doing that by reading the room and reading the team and reading the organization, you're proceeding to have productivity be humanized. And I think for me, that's the power of an adaptive leader or an adaptive team is that they go productivity and humanization and getting human input into productivity are or they're an organic whole.
hmm You mentioned earlier that often there's a shrinking value proposition here there's where we talk about what can humans do that computers can't, that AI can't do right now. And that that moves into that conversation about AI is putting individuals out of a job. And thinking, taking a step back and thinking about how it's not the conversation isn't what jobs is AI putting people out of, it's or the frame of it's about which organizations are not using AI and which organizations are. And so our role as leaders is not about necessarily exclusively managing people using AI. It's about managing AI in addition to managing people and emphasizing the incorporation of AI into our everyday work. I would love your advice on what you've seen based on your research in the difference between executive and non-executive staff using AI. Do you see any differences in how AI is being used between seniorities?
That's a very interesting question. I can certainly say without hesitation that I see a difference in people's affective and emotional relationship to the AI that they're using relative to their, position in the hierarchy. Um, are you asking in terms of their actual usage, how they differ? I mean, yeah, it's interesting because my first answer is that's a really contextual question, and I think it is um, because when you have more of the power, you're looking more broadly at how is AI animating and implementing what we need to be doing. When you're in an individual using it, you're often really thinking, how can it augment me in what I'm doing? And there's a very big difference there. There's a gap there. So part of what I would say is, I think this is that earlier question you asked about, if you don't have the decision power, but this is even more finely tuned question because we know that there are spheres of there's proximity to power. And I think the farther you get away from the top in your proximal power, typically the more you have to check on how you're using AI. And so to me, I don't have a specific answer actually in terms of the differential uses, but I do see and I do hear as part of the sort of problematics of the moment in organizations and teams that it's often that people higher up in the hierarchy become very frustrated with people who are lower in the hierarchy who are afraid to take risks or take the initiative to use AI on their own. And there's a real frustration, and it's often indexed as lack of skill or lack of motivation or lack of leadership, when actually it's hesitation in a power structure that is about usually keeping one's job, or at least the perception of that. So I'll stop there.
Fascinating. We have some excellent questions coming into the chat, and I want to take a moment at 3:45. Sharon, do you have an additional 5, 10 minutes to keep this
Sure,
conversation going?
sure.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to.
Everyone who's still with us, please stay on if you can, because I would personally love to hear from you. I believe Dr. Ravitch would as well. And I want to encourage you to drop some more questions into the chat. And while we do that, I would love to actually throw out a poll to everyone, because as Dr. Ravitch and I were preparing for this conversation, we wanted to learn more about you, what you were coming to what kind of questions you were coming to the table with, and also what level of experience you have with AI. So I'd love to put up a first poll so that talks about what you believe to be the most important learning priority for you right now regarding AI. We have, and I'll read through the options, but you could probably read through them faster than I can actually. But what would be the most useful to learn as a woman leader in AI in this moment? Is it how to manage others using AI tools, how to communicate about AI adoption, how to build workflows that leverage AI tools, how to use AI tools directly? Like I'm thinking of prompt engineering, hands-on skills, maybe building out flows, how to navigate AI ethics, responsible use. We talked a little bit about this, Dr. Ravitch, earlier about how do you use AI ethically in your organization? What does that look like in your organization? How might that be influenced by outside regulations? So people are continuing to enter their responses in the chat. Please do.
Great.
These are meaty responses.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
Another option is how to make people-centered decisions in an AI-driven workplace. And the final is how to build confidence and credibility as an AI savvy leader. So please, I know that please do submit your answers. I think there's, oh, you're gonna, I think there are, I'm like catching up with some conversations in the chat, and I love seeing that here. I'm going to wrap up this poll for now. It looks like we have how to build confidence and credibility as an AI savvy leader.
Oh, wow. This is
It,
very helpful.
mhm.
Can I just, I would love to open it up. Can I just share some sort of closing thoughts and then we can open it up to people to ask questions? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
fine.
So as I was thinking about this morning, it's really women's leadership is the heart of the heart of leadership for me, and so is AI in this moment. As someone who's been studying adaptive leadership, this is the next change management for executives and all leaders and all organizations. So I just wanted to share some hopes for what participants discover about themselves during these sessions or during this session, and one concrete leadership move that you can make when you return to work. So I just want to say first to our participants, thank you for all you do all the time, even if no one is looking. And I hope that each of you leave with a clear answer to these three questions. What does AI activate in me? What responsibility am I unwilling to outsource? And where can I exercise influence now? So, in terms of my hopes for you, my one hope is that you discover that you are far more ready to lead this moment than you may think. So much of the AI conversation is designed to make capable leaders feel like they're behind. If you haven't mastered the AI tools, you're not qualified to lead the change. But that's not true. And so this moment really requires the capacity to lead people through uncertainty, to hold trust when everything is shifting, and to ask the human questions underneath the technical ones. That's not a capacity you need to acquire. Most of you have been building this your entire careers, often uncredited. So reclaim the strengths you already have because they aren't peripheral to this AI moment. They are the point. And I hope that you discover that your hesitation was never a deficiency. Read your own and others' hesitation as an adaptive signal. It's the difference between managing self-doubt and leading with discernment. So now the concrete move, and then I'll close up this part out. Convene one honest conversation about AI that your organization is not yet having. Not a training, not a rollout, a conversation. Get the real questions on the table. What are we actually agreeing to? What's permitted? What's off limits? Where does the human need to stay in the loop? Who's accountable when it's wrong? And what are we quietly afraid of? One conversation deliberately convened. That single act can help shape the boundaries, surface fear as intelligence instead of letting it go underground. And this can really help make a culture safe enough to be honest. And it repositions the person doing this convening and this leadership move from someone who is implementing a decision to someone who is part of leading the change. So I just want to say thank you. Each of your work is vital in this moment of absolutely exponentializing challenge and change.
I love that. I love that so much. You talked, I know, I believe this is in your bio as well about wanting to impart pragmatic approaches to pragmatic applications of your work to others. And this is such a practical one. Like convening an actual conversation and being openly inviting everyone to talk about boundaries is an exercise of influence. Like if you go out
Absolutely.
there and convene a group, hold a coffee chat, invite people to lunch, brown bag it. Like if you're starting these conversations and you continue to lead hosting these conversations to ask the honest questions of what are other people doing? How is this impacting
That's
your
right.
work?
That's
What have
right.
you heard so far? You're coming out as that influencing force in your
That's
organization.
exactly right. And that to me is what real leadership is, especially in this moment. Leadership is about human dialogue right now and about humans being solutionary together in ways that will make these times better thought out and therefore more sustainable.
With final questions coming in, where I'm going to start winding this down a little
Sure.
bit.
Yeah.
There is, I'm reading through one final question right now. I think I'd like to volley to you. Um, it's considering proximity to work is often peopled by roles disproportionately held by women. What are the organizational vehicles through which women's voices are most robustly heard? So, whose decisions are thereby most often operationalized? That's an interesting one.
So how are decisions operationalized? I just want to make sure I understand.
No, yeah, I'm thinking through this one as well. Liza, if you're still on the call, please do chime in. We have, so she's asking about what are the organizational, oh, she's raised her hand. Can I pass her? Let's see if we can do this.
Absolutely.
Ah, Liza, join the talk.
Hi, Sharon. Can you hear me?
Hello, Liza. How are
Hi.
you?
Well, thank you. The crux of the question really is around the vehicles. So through which often these cross-cutting, what I'm inferring are cross-cutting teams with those who are closest to the work are positioned to make decisions. What form do those vehicles take? Whether it's a longstanding committee, are they cross departmental? How cross function, cross dis? So
Yeah,
what?
yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question. So, one answer to this is what I think of as boundary spanning. If you're thinking about AI adoption and integration, you have to be thinking about boundary spanning. And boundary spanning is the way you horizontalize something across all of the units of a company or an organization. And so my first answer is it's through intentional transparent boundary spanning that we need to be thinking about. So I might do something for AI in my unit, my team, whatever it might be. Actually, we need to be thinking about how we intersect in the ecosystem with the rest of the ecosystem. And so one thing is boundary spanning. And really, this AI moment is change management. AI is the new thing we're doing change management with, but it is change management. And so the principles of change management are thinking about boundary spanning. How do you drill and shape change through an organization? The thing I'll add in this AI moment is boundary spanning requires discovery around AI to understand how AI changes workflows in one team or unit or part of a system can look very, very different. And so part of the boundary spanning has to be very differentiated to really, really understand, you're not boundary spanning in the same way across every unit, right? It has to look bespoke to that unit's necessary process outputs deliverables. And so that's my sort of biggest answer, is that the framing and the approach for the implementation has to be one of change management, of boundary spanning. And I'll say this, another layer of answer to this is the problem we have in most companies in this moment, and we're seeing this happen with AI now, is something called institutional isomorphism, where a few big organizations make a set of moves and everyone copies them. And so what we actually need in this moment is profound institutional differentiation, where the AI game is a customized game, and it will have to be a customized game. And I'm not just talking about using your own internal model. I'm talking way more about how that model gets customized so that it supports things like, boundary spanning and change management. And so to me, those are some of the levers. And then some of the more specific levers actually in this moment, I think, need to be created, right? Knowledge transfer systems in most companies are already 20, 30 years outdated. And so I think this is a moment for many companies to be really thinking about their knowledge transfer and communication systems, multiple systems they're using that don't speak to each other. This is more prevalent in certain industries than others, but it's across industry. And that this is a moment where the integration of AI into specific workflows and into specific workscapes beyond workflows really has to be calibrated with what we know in 2026 about systems. So I'll stop there, but thank you very much, Liza, for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Ravitch. so much for the wonderful
Absolutely.
conversation, sharing so many insights from your research and giving us some thoughtful perspectives to take with us into later today, into tomorrow, and into our work and workplaces. We are hosting the Women's Leadership Program this upcoming September. I'm so excited to see you in person, Dr. Ravitch, in September.
Me too.
And I'm listening to you speak in our classroom, and I invite everyone on the call to join us in our classroom in a couple months. Please join us. We'd love to hear your thoughts about how AI is shaping your role, your organization, your perspectives. We'd love to have you in the classroom. Registration is still open. Jen has already gotten in front of me. She's so fast. She is dropping the registration dates into and the start dates into the chat. Please let us know if you have any questions. My contact information and ways to connect with Dr. Ravitch will be sent to you in a follow-up email. So thank you, Dr. Ravitch. It's been
Thank you
great.
so much, Kristin. You're so fabulous. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you, Jen, for managing all of this so that we could have a flowing conversation. Thank you very, very much.
I hope everyone has a wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care.